Okay.
Okay.
Do you got any hot topics?
It's not a hot topic, but my wife just walked in and gave me this morning, and it's not like a Valentine's Day present or anything, but
That's
little
sweet.
succulents for the desk.
Nice. Um, I was gonna say, did you see they released the State of React survey?
Oh, I haven't looked at it. It's in my email
I haven't
inbox.
looked
I've
at
been
it
meaning to
yet.
check on it.
Yeah. It's like that would be fun to go through. What am
All I
I
want to
doing?
hear is public
Tweeting.
opinion on server components. That's pretty much it.
I love them.
Yeah,
I do. Yeah. I was,
I
like,
think
skeptical, like, why are we going down this path? I'm not sure I have complete buy-in on it, but I really do love them.
no, I think they're going to be good. I think 2025 is the year that we see React compiler come out as a Vite
Mhm.
plugin, and then it just gets
Oh,
adopted
that'll be
everywhere.
interesting.
And now
Yeah.
React is just compiled.
Um, so one of the things I love about the Redwood, like, GraphQL pattern with cells and stuff is you can just, like, grab content wherever you are, and, like, the data lives really close to the component that's using it.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
so that was, like, one of the frustrations I had with Remix is that because you have these loaders, it just felt like I'm prop drilling all of this data down and kind of became a little bit difficult to manage where I was like, I want the data to be near the component that's using it. And every time I use this component, I don't have to like load it within the loader. I want it to be like right there. And it just knows if I'm using this component, then I need this data. And like I started to say the stinky thing. It's not really stinky. It's just an opinion about Redwood is that it also means you have to buy into GraphQL, which I'm not against GraphQL. Like, I really do love how Redwood uses it with their generators and things like that. The thing that I don't like about it is that the I put easy in air quotes, the easiest way to use it is with Apollo. And so when you do that, you define your query at the top, and then you have, or say like a mutation, that's probably a better example. You have your GraphQL mutation at the top. You have a Apollo hook that sets up the function, and then you have a function that actually runs. So you have a lot of boilerplate code because you have all these steps that you have to use. That's like a lot of lines of code.
Yeah.
And so, like, that's the annoying part of it. And so the thing about React server components is you get all the benefit of having the data close to the component that you're using, as long as it's a server component. But you don't have all that boilerplate code that you had to pull in with GraphQL and use Apollo.
Yeah.
So that's why I'm like, this is lovely.
Do you know that Remix does have a way to kind of
Do they?
grab arbitrary data from
Is
any
it that
loader that you want?
use Fetcher? No, please tell me about it.
Yeah, I actually use, well, great topic for the actual podcast, but just it's called use route
You
data
froze.
loader.
Oh, there you go. Sorry,
That's what,
you froze for a second. I'm
oh,
not sure if that's me. I have an extra browser window open just because I'm trying to tweet this.
yeah, use route data loader. Use
Oh,
route
interesting.
loader data. And
Okay.
then you just give it the string of the route and boom, you have it. It's a hook.
Interesting. Oh,
And
I
so
might have
what
to
you
try
do
this.
is you just, now you think about it like this. You think about it like this URL or this route, whether it be
Uh-huh.
a nested route or like it could even be a root
Yep.
loader. This route needs this data, and you load it in one place, and then it's
Yes.
fetchable, and then it's usable with a hook from
Yes.
really
Lovely.
anywhere.
Lovely. I'm gonna have to look at this again.
Yeah. So I use that in my authentication implementation. We talk about it.
Very cool.
We go live here.
And, well, are you using just maybe tease this, are you using middle they don't have middleware yet, do they, or did they release that PR? Brooks was
Not
talking
yet.
about it.
Not
Okay.
yet. It is still in progress, but yeah,
Okay.
I just use a function. But yeah, middleware would be great.
Okay. I'm just tweeting about this for the people that are watching right now wondering what's going on. So you can retweet it if you're on Twitter or X watching. But I'll kind of talk about it as I'm typing. I think this should be a good conversation. So today we're going to be talking about some of the productivity things that Brad's been working on with starter templates and creating packages. He rolled his own auth, so we'll talk about that, which will be really interesting. And then some of the stuff that I've been doing with Build 12, I've been trying to kind of like, I haven't committed to a starter yet, but I've been creating a doc. And that'll be interesting to kind of talk about a
Sweet.
doc that outlines every single thing that I've added and every single piece of configuration. And so when I started February's project, which I'm doing exactly what you told me not to do, Brad.
Uh-oh.
You told me to finish one project before I moved on to the next.
Oh, no.
So it's fine. It's fine. We can talk about that. But it was super helpful when I started February's project because I just worked through that document. So that document probably in January took me maybe a day to like write and work through, and it took me an hour, maybe a little bit less for February. So it'll be even better when I have like a template repo that I can just clone.
Yeah. Yeah.
And releasing your own npm packages. Okay. Muscle emoji post. Okay, cool.
Yeah.
All right. That's fun. Yes, I need to look at the State of React survey too and see what people are thinking. But
Yeah.
I'm like buying into what you suggested. Like try and find as best you can, tie yourself, make opinions about the stack you're going to use. So I feel like last year was all about like, I'm going to compare all the frameworks and see everything. And then I was just like running in mental circles about what would be the best framework. But it's like, okay, if you just go deep on one and get good at one, you can move a lot faster.
And here's what I like about that too is like, let let's say you're still even undecided. What you should do is pick the things you know best and build
Mm-hmm.
that stack.
Yep.
Then what I like about that is you always have a reference point. And so you can
Mm-hmm.
make a pull request on your stack, swapping out one thing for another. And then you can sit back and be like, is this actually better or not?
Mm-hmm.
And if you're making those decisions as you go, you'll never get to the end because you're constantly deciding on every little thing. So
Mm-hmm.
build something,
Yep.
set that reference point.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. Well, and the thing is, like, no framework is absolutely perfect. And you're going to hit those edges no matter what. But it's
Yeah.
like if you can solve that problem once and document it, that means the next time you solve it, it's going to be a whole lot easier versus like constantly trying to shift gears. Be like, well,
And even better than documenting it, it's like, you just have the repo with it all done. Like,
mhm,
this is exactly how I want it. I fixed it
yeah,
all. It's perfect.
yeah. Um, I do have a question about Sentry. Well, I'll hold it
Yeah.
or ask you later. Okay. Let's see. I'll go ahead and cue up the music and we can get started. I think this would be a good one. Okay, perfect. What's up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of Compressed FM, a podcast all about web design and development with a little bit of zest. Today, it is just me and Brad talking about auth solutions. Brad just rolled his own auth into his starter template. We'll talk about starter templates and releasing your own NPM packages.
Web development and design, who would have guessed? Well, we can do them both, even add a little zest. So turn up the volume, get ready for the best. Let's get it started in this episode of Compress.
Hello, my name is Amy Dutton. I am a lead maintainer on the Redwood JS core team.
Hey, y'all. My name is Brad Garapi, and I'm a senior front end developer at Stripe.
Awesome. I love how Texas that sounds. Every week, hey, y'all.
Yeah. Everything I do, my streams, the podcast,
I love
pretty
it.
much how I say hi to anybody.
I love it. There is a video that I made like 20 years ago, and I say, I think I said, hello, welcome to the city of Nashville. And I'm trying to control how I say Nashville, but my Southern accent came out really thick when I said Nashville. So it always kind of makes me giggle. Just those certain words, it's like uh, if you talk to certain people, that Southern accent will thicken up just a little bit.
That's for sure. I don't know if I have a Southern accent, though, at this point,
You're
but
not too
like,
bad.
I did used to say pecan because I'm from the
Mm,
north.
that's
But I
what you keep
dropped that.
under your bed. That's
What's
what we
that?
always said. A pecan's what you keep under your bed.
Oh god, gross.
Well, some people, modern technology,
Yeah, yeah.
Um, that's hilarious. Yeah, when we lived in Chicago, that was one thing people said. They're like, "Where's your Southern accent?" And it's like,
Yeah,
well, Nashville's pretty transient, so I feel like I've been able to avoid some of it, but I will have my Southern moments.
yeah.
So, Henry and I always laughed about just different things that would come out. So, like, one time he went to the store with a bunch of kids and, like, divided out the grocery list and was like, "Hey, go get this stuff and meet me back here. I'll be at the front with my buggy." And they were like, "Your
No,
horse-drawn
buggy.
carriage?"
No.
It's like, "Come on." So, we don't say that anymore. We say cart.
Yeah, and I feel like that's even more of like an overseas thing, like
Mm.
a British thing.
Europe. Awesome. Well, and I've been hanging out with more Australians lately, which is really
Oh,
fun.
yeah.
And just the spellings kinda throw me a little bit. The Queen's English, the proper
Yep,
English.
yep.
Okay, so we can get into the content. I know that's really what everybody's here for versus, uh, Queen's English versus American English. Um,
I have one related non
okay.
sequitur before we
Yes,
jump
please.
into it. Um, I finally paid money for a developer tool.
Oh, when
Can
you
you guess
told
what it
me
is?
that well, you hinted, so that's cheating that I know, but I thought you were gonna get the open source version of this, so I'm surprised that you paid money for it.
What, for Copilot?
Mhm.
No, I went all in. I mean, I
You
love the
did.
GitHub, or I love the VS Code integration, and
Okay.
I feel like I like VS Code's style better than the cursor style,
Okay.
and it's
Interesting.
giving me what I need.
Okay.
I love, like, the inline chats for making
Okay.
quick edits or changes. Like,
Yep.
this morning at work, I used it for changing an enzyme test to a React testing library test. It's great. Worked
Nice.
perfect. But yeah, the other day, I was on stream and I ran out of free completions, and I was like, "Oh, that's weird." I was feeling like not a helping hand for a minute, and then boom, it
Mm.
popped up, and right there, I was like, "I'm paying the money for it. Like, it's worth it."
That's awesome. Yeah, so I have Copilot because I work on an open source project. They will help, which is really awesome, so I get that for free.
I've tried that. Do you, like, know somebody, or did you just submit and it worked?
No, I don't even know what I did.
No, Redwood's
Um,
big. Like, my
and
personal website doesn't count, you know?
well, also Tom co-founded GitHub.
Yeah, that too.
I don't know if Redwood filed to say, "Hey, will you help us?"
Mhm.
I don't know if I got it that way. I don't remember. I just know that I stopped paying for it.
That's
But
awesome.
I do pay $4 a month, which is like nothing for GitHub. And I think I could probably even get rid of that. I think what it gives you is, um,
Orgs, right?
it
Like,
yeah,
teams and orgs and
but I think it gives you like wikis in repos, and I'm not using that feature at
okay.
all. Yeah, I'm not using that anywhere.
You know, I think it would be really cool to see open source should do this, to go all in on GitHub for, like, project management,
Mhm. Yep,
documentation, everything. I think it's definitely doable. They offer enough stuff, but I think some of that stuff could be a bit more streamlined. Like,
yep,
discussions seem like the Wild West. The wikis probably need more improvement to get to where they need to be, but
yep,
it's all
yep.
there, the primitives.
Yeah, that's so true. Well, and at Redwood, for a while, we were tracking all of, like, our roadmap and everything,
Yeah,
and community issues and PRs through GitHub projects,
yeah,
which is really helpful too for visibility. For a while, we were using Notion, but one of the reasons why we moved
yeah.
to GitHub is for visibility.
One place, easily linkable, like,
Yep.
everybody knows where to go, that's the project, and I think it works well for open source stuff,
Yeah.
very specifically.
Right, and that was part of it. So what's interesting in GitHub projects is you can create a card, but it's like a note, it's not an issue yet. But then from that, you can convert that to an issue, you can have
Right.
discussions, and then you can complete it as like a PR. So you really can go through the whole life cycle of a ticket or a card or a PR using GitHub projects. And to your point, the fact that all of that conversation is there, the comments and the discussion get attached to that issue that gets attached to that code in the repo. Just
Yeah.
the even the archival piece of it and the self-documenting piece of it is really great.
I think they need more education there, or, like, more
Mhm.
marketing. or both,
Yep.
right? Like they don't talk about it that much and they should.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. Cool. Yeah, so I am using Cursor. We do have a company account for Cursor, and that's been just like super great. So I'm pretty much all in on Cursor. I will tell you one frustration that I have with Cursor that you do have a better experience with in VS Code is when you get ready to do file imports. It's almost as Cursor wants to be like, I want to use AI to do this. Whereas like VS Code's like, yeah, I know your project. Here you go. And
Yeah.
so it's a little bit slower when you're trying to like tab through. It's gotten better and it's gotten faster, but I have noticed that it's like you should know this is part of the project instead of trying to use AI to do everything.
You know what I don't like about VS Code's imports? While they're always correct, they work. Um, they don't respect your TS config paths. Like if you
Mm,
set up the alias shortcuts, like
yes. Yes.
if that's pretty much only on the first import of a file. So like
Mhm.
it'll import it relative rather
Yep.
than using the config alias. And then
Yep.
you get one in there and then it figures it out. But
Yeah.
I
Well, and
always find myself doing that.
that would be a thing with Cursor. It knows like, hey, this is the pattern you've used on all of your other files. We're going to use the same pattern.
Yeah.
So cool. Yeah. It's just so cool. Some of that stuff. But okay. So as we kind of dive in, I can transition into this. So I mentioned this a little bit, but I used Cursor recently to create my own npm package, and I'd never done that before. I know you have like 30 packages. So I'd also love to talk about some of the things that you've packaged up. But the thing that has been really helpful to me is I'm doing this Build 12 project where I'm building 12 projects in 12 months, which I'm also realizing the insanity of that. But trying to figure out how many pieces can I reuse and take with me from project to project. And
Yeah.
the fact that I can create my own packages makes that super simple. I mean, I'm even feeling the benefits of that in month 2 now. But there is still a level when you're working with AI of you have to know what's going on. And so when you're talking about kind of rolling your own package, I thought maybe if we talk a little bit about that process, because I feel like that's different than saying doing standard typical web development is having to work with a package. There was a learning curve there for me.
Yeah. I think the first decision you really have to make is what is worth packaging up.
Mhm.
What is what is project specific and what can be carried with.
Yeah.
Um, and then you also need to think about the scope of a package. Is it
Mhm.
worth it to do a lot of small packages? Or do you kind of want to like bundle a bunch of stuff into like at Amy Dutton slash
Mhm.
utils and just publish that to NPM or something?
Yeah.
Um, and the way I view it is like it's almost weird because everything I do is based off of templates in GitHub repos. So the code is already there. It's kind of like almost a copy and paste type thing. So when I spin up the template, I'm actually just copying that code essentially. But it helps if you have older templates that you've spun up and you're leveraging your own npm packages. If you bump a new release on that package, you can, npm update on all your old projects. So
Yeah.
I think it's easier for like long-term maintenance.
Yep. Yeah, and I think that's a good point too. In the package that I released, so I did it's called Lemon Lime SVGs, where it's creating a Sprite SVG. Sprite is lemon lime soda. That's where the name came from. But it was a script that I was taking from project to project. I was just copying and pasting all the contents of the
Uh,
file. And I thought this would be really helpful. And I mean, if you go to NPM, there's hundreds of packages that do this. It's not like I'm claiming to be like, wow, look what I brought into the world.
but it's
But
it's
for
yours. It's your way. You know it's gonna work.
that's true, and I also know how the configuration works, and it does it
Yes.
exactly how I want it to.
Yeah.
But it was for me, it was also a huge part of it was the experience of building my own package. And so I had the script file, and then the part that I used Cursor for was to help me package all of it up. And the package part that I wasn't really expecting, which I can see what you're talking about when you're talking about code bloat, is that it did have to add additional things for setup. So this particular file you can use whether you're using an Astro project, a Next project, a Redwood project, a Svelte project. It's going to package all those SVGs up for you. The thing though is if you are using a different framework, you might want those files to live somewhere else. And so it's building in the logic to be able to set those things up and handle those paths dynamically.
Yeah.
So with this particular thing, I wasn't too worried about the extra cruft just because it's really a development project. Like you're going to do that when you're building locally. It's not something that actually gets shipped with your code to your final project. So it's fine. But I could see too why some people are like, I would rather just write my own code versus reaching for a package for certain features.
Yeah. Yeah, because then you need to support a wide array of use cases.
Mhm.
But you don't have to. Like, if that package is namespaced under your name on npm, which I
Mhm.
tend to do for a lot of things, it kind of signals to npm users, hey, this is kind of like mine, right?
Mm.
Like,
Mhm.
I'm putting it out there, you can use it, but like it's kind of tailored for my use case. But then unnamed space projects, I feel like should be more general and, cover a wide array of use cases.
Sure. Sure. So the thing that surprised me is usually when you're doing package development, what you'll do is you'll create your code, typically using Redwood, or sorry, Rollup. I saw a comment, it threw me off. Typically using Rollup to build that package so that it's usable. But then you don't necessarily have to release that package in order to test it locally. You
Right.
can do what's called a link, where you just say npm link, and what that does is that creates a global symlink for you to be able to reference that within another project locally. So if I go over to my test project, then I would say npm link lemon lime SVGs, and it would grab that code from my local development. And then obviously when you go to production, you could swap that out, but it allows you to test that package before you publish it, and then having to iterate on version numbers and things like that. And then when you make changes to the package, you'd say npm build and then npm link to update that link. And then you would have to update that link within your test project. So at least when I was doing a lot of that development, it felt like I kept running the same commands over and over again in order to test the things that I was building.
You know what I like to do instead of that?
Yeah,
Um, you
please,
can
if there's a better workflow.
Link got really annoying after a while because
Yes,
yeah, you
yes,
kind of constantly have to mess with it.
100%.
You can npm install a package from a file location. So what that means
Okay.
is you could
Yep.
npm install the relative path to your dist directory in your package, and it's always there. So you just npm run build on your package. It lives in its dist directory,
Mhm.
and then the project consuming it has just installed it from that location. So it's kind of
Okay.
always updating when you build it.
Yes. Okay. That makes sense.
That's a better way.
I'm pretty sure that's what Redwood is doing with some of the things that they're experimenting with RSC, because they have their new Redwood package in a repo, and then there's a folder there called experiments. And so everything in that experiment folder is a different project that they're using for testing.
Sure.
And so they had said, "Hey, put your project in this folder so that it automatically gets any updates that we make." And that makes
Right.
sense what you're talking about.
Right. And now it's the whole question of how you build and bundle your package. Because sometimes you could just import directly from your package's source. Like if it's a JavaScript module,
Mhm.
you could just skip the whole like npm install process. And if they both live on your machine next to each other, you could literally just import from that
Oh,
directory.
interesting. Okay.
But it depends. You kind of want to like use your package as a package so that it's going through the package.json to find the
Mhm.
index file and access it that way.
Yep. Yep, that makes sense. Yeah, that's cool.
And
So oh, go
Ant
ahead.
Fu recently published a blog post, and I've been on this train for a while. If you're publishing npm packages, they should be ESM only now.
Mm.
It works in the
Mhm.
browser, it works in Node, and it's supported to import ESM into Common JS better than the other way around. So we
Mhm.
should all be doing ESM only packages at this point.
Yeah. So what are some of the things that you've packaged up? Because I know you have, like, 30 packages.
I've done a bunch. I've done a lot of Markdown plugins. I've done a lot of
Mm.
flop plugins. I've done my
Yeah.
ESLint configs. And then what else have I done?
I was
I
gonna
need
say
to
while you're
log
like
in and see.
okay, while you're looking that up, I also created a package for a lot of React hooks that I was carrying from package to package. So I have one for like clicking outside. I have another one for hitting the escape key. So that's great if you have modals or slide out panels or drop down menus. It makes it easy to set up, like I said, the escape key, or if you click outside that, it'll automatically close those menus or those windows.
A lot of times I make small packages wrapping APIs that I don't like.
Mm.
Like, I, this is a mistake. Don't do this. But I wrapped fetch and published a package, like assuming everything was JSON.
Mm.
Um, and then it was kind of like Axios, where you could do like a .get .post, and it just awaited the response.json. But it's not good enough. Like the fetch API is actually really good, and if you think you could do a better job, you probably can't.
Mm.
So
Have
that
you
one was a mistake.
Have you deprecated it? Like, what does the process look like for that? If you're like, I don't recommend this anymore. You
It's
don't want to break people's stuff.
Yeah, it's still there. Um, I don't even know if anybody's depending on it, to be honest.
Okay,
No, it's
interesting.
only getting like 13 downloads a week.
Okay, it's still more than my little.
But I have my most popular one is a hook called use countdown, where you just
Okay,
give it a time and it counts down from that time. And every second it gives you like the minutes, the seconds, the formatted timestamp. So you can like just use it.
nice, nice, nice.
That one gets thousands and thousands of downloads. It's crazy.
Really,
Yeah.
that's cool. Yeah, I'm not sure what else I will package up because I think a lot of the other things that I want to do fit into that starter template mentality
I
because
find
that's more of
myself
like,
doing SDKs a lot.
mm,
Um, I did the Philips Hue has an SDK, so you can
mm-hmm,
control your lights locally. I just put a JavaScript wrapper around it because it didn't exist, and there was like a complicated auth process.
mm-hmm,
Um, so yeah, now that's like easily shareable.
yeah. This might be a dumb question, so
No such thing.
listeners can judge me. What Where do you draw the line between what's an SDK and what's not? Like, I throw that around all the time, but I'm like, is that just like an API? Is that just a package for interacting with the API? Like, where do you draw those lines for what is an SDK and what's not?
I mean, I take what I call an SDK is a JavaScript library around an API. That's normally
Okay.
what I'm referring to.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, because then I mean, that gets into the whole discussion of like, what's a library? What's a framework? What's
Yeah,
to me,
yeah,
that's what the SDK stuff fits into. But yeah, okay. I'm
yeah.
like,
But
I
normally
use
that's
SDKs all the time, but like, what is it really? Like, let's be theological about it.
well, and it's SDK stands for like software development kit. And a
Mm,
lot of times, like because I have this background in electrical engineering, a lot of times it was like the microcontroller has an SDK that allows you to program its pins. And so that
mhm.
SDK is the interface between you and your application and then the thing you're trying to access.
Yep.
So that's a SDK for something physical.
Yep.
And then I view like all these APIs as like an SDK for something
Right.
digital, right?
Right. Right. Well, it's like I've been using Supabase SDK all day long, but in some regards, it feels like just the API. Like what?
That's what you're doing. You're just hitting
Yeah.
their API. So
Right.
yeah.
Right. Right. Or I was trying to think. Cloudinary has one. Authkit has one.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
just I guess mostly a matter of semantics.
Yeah.
So with your starter template, tell me about some of the things that you're including.
So yeah, I decided to build my own auth. I'm cheap. And so I'm like, auth is not that hard. And it's really not that hard. Like I had auth up and running in 3 hours from zero to like authenticated cookie session, sign in, sign out stuff.
Mhm.
But
And is
now I'm
that
trying to
everything with like JWTs, access tokens, refresh tokens? Is that all that?
no, this is like you like cookie auth. So
Okay.
you log in with a username and password, you get a cookie, uh, send it back down, and now on every request that cookie goes through and it gets validated, you know?
Okay. Okay.
We don't need JWTs in this case because you're not trying to access APIs from the client or anything like that.
I see. Okay.
Um, you could use a JWT just to store data differently in a cookie if you wanted like
Mhm.
additional validation to like sign and verify that on every request, but didn't do any of
Okay.
that.
Okay.
Um, so yeah, this is like your pretty basic authentication. Um,
Did you
and
set
so
up email for forget password, reset password?
Not yet.
Okay.
So you like now what I'm doing is just generating the like link
Mhm.
to forgot passwords. All it is like any random string you generate and you throw it into somebody's user account and you say this is their
Mhm.
password token. It expires, whenever. And so if they ever try to hit that link or, go through the reset password flow, you
Mhm.
just double check that and make that decision.
Yep.
Um But one of the interesting things there was the session storage APIs that was working with in Remix. I never understood some of that stuff, and it finally clicked. So the whole deal is like as soon as a user gives you their email and password and you validate that it matches, you need to send back a cookie. And you could do that with just the create cookie API, and you could make that whole cookie string and send it back in the header. But Remix has these APIs called like create session. And session was really nebulous to me. I always thought that it meant like you're storing a user's session ID in a session table in a database. You can invalidate that. In this
Mhm.
case, it doesn't mean that. It simply means like now that you have this data about the user, you're going to have to return something or save it somewhere, and you could store it as a cookie. You could store it in IndexedDB. You could store it in local storage. There's many like places you could put it, or even like Cloudflare KV or whatever.
Mhm.
And they have a create session API for all of those storage places. And so,
Very cool.
yes, you could just create a cookie and do it, but this makes it a little bit easier where if you ever want to change that or store it in multiple places or store different pieces of data, it's a whole lot easier than making that cookie string yourself.
Mhm. Mhm.
And so I was using the create session APIs to create the cookie string and send it back down.
Very cool.
And
Yeah,
then
that's
I would
awesome.
say like the other part that was it took a little bit of thinking was like, okay, how do I determine on the front end if I have a user, right? You have
Mhm.
to read the cookies in your loader from the server
Mhm.
side. You have to be able to like read the cookie, look up the user, and then return that back down to your root loader of your application. And then I set up this little use auth hook that just grabs the root loader data, determines if a user is present, and either returns that object or null. You can go from there.
Yeah. Are you doing any validation? Like checking
As far as like
passwords to say, "Oh, this is a valid password. It has X number of characters and symbols and"
not doing any of that yet.
Okay.
I might do it here in the future. And
Mhm.
then another thing I was gonna do is just setting the max age on the cookie to where after like,
Mhm.
whatever, 10 days, 7 days, your session's not valid anymore, so you have to log in again.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, because you could even set up that remember me checkbox to determine the age of the cookie.
Yeah, which let's remember me checkboxes. All they're doing is setting the max age on the cookie to
Yeah.
some longer time frame. It doesn't
Sure.
mean forever. It just means
Right.
instead of maybe 1 week, it's like a month.
Right. 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 Interesting.
And then the other thing I want to implement is like the notion of if you're unauthenticated and you try to access an authenticated page, I want to redirect you to sign in and then redirect you back to the page you were trying to access.
Mm.
And that's just a query parameter. So the plan is I just redirect them to sign in with a query parameter of like
Yep.
redirect to, and then once that's complete, sign in has that query param. It just sends you instead
Yeah.
of just to home or whatever, it sends you to that page.
Yeah. That's really cool. Interesting.
Yeah. So now I was like going through and testing all of that. So I was like
Yeah.
having to seed the database to like have users in there, go
Mhm.
through like cookie flows and stuff like that. And I did end-to-end tests as well. So both unit and end-to-end.
Very cool. Are you using, like, Cypress or Playwright for your end-to-end tests?
Playwright for end-to-end, and
Okay.
then V-test with React testing library
Yep.
for that.
What did you decide about your database?
Right now, SQLite.
Really? Okay.
Yeah, I follow this guy, Catalin Pitt, on
Yeah, he's
Twitter
awesome.
and Blue Sky and all that. He's great. And he, as I was going through this Postgres versus SQLite thing, Prisma's got the same interface, so it doesn't matter. So for
Mhm.
like local development or testing, SQLite is incredible. It's so easy
Mhm.
to seed and all that stuff. And that's something that might change in the future, like once I decide on a database host, because I think SQLite is probably going to be more of a challenge to host in a sense that there's just not a ton of distributed SQLite database hosts out there. Like
Mhm.
shout out Terso, but that's
Yeah.
pretty much it.
Yeah. Well, I remember when we had Aaron Francis on, he was like, "Unless you're doing something really crazy, like enterprise level, SQLite will get you what you need."
Yes. And that's what Catalan was saying. He's like, dude,
Yeah.
SQLite or Postgres every time, but
Mhm.
99% of the time, SQLite's going to do it, you know? So, and
I
heck, if
also
your apps are small, you could put the SQLite database on the server that's running
Yeah.
it. The problem is if you're distributing your app, okay, you have to like figure out a way to replicate SQLite and all that stuff. And that's Tennessee Dodds does that with the Epic stack. And I don't think I'm going to go that far.
Okay. Interesting. Yeah, I think it's easier to go SQLite to Postgres than it is to go Postgres to SQLite if you're using, like, some of Postgres features, like Postgres has enum
Yeah,
support.
RLS.
Yes, things like that, row level security. So it is easier, I think, if you go SQLite. SQLite, if I remember correctly, is also a little bit more particular about the order that you create things within your database, whereas Postgres is a little bit more forgiving.
Yeah, but luckily, if you're using an ORM like Prisma, they take care of like all
Mhm,
that. So
mhm,
now I think data structure wise, they both support the exact same set of like Prisma types essentially.
mm,
So you could stick
cool.
JSON in there, you could stick blobs in there, anything.
Awesome. Yeah, I think most of my experience was I was building a Laravel project and I think I started with Postgres, but then if you
Hmm.
use their Forge or Envoy services, those are only SQL, MySQL.
Mm,
And so I had to convert some of the
yeah.
Postgres features because there you are writing migrations, um, like your ups and downs and things like that. It's not being controlled through something like Prisma.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, Prisma's a lifesaver for me
Yeah.
still. Like that was an easy bet. I will experiment with Drizzle after this, like
Mm,
after the React app, Remix app starter has settled. I want to like see how Drizzle feels because I
mhm,
know their type generation is a little bit better, like a little
mm,
more
mhm.
TypeScript native.
Yeah. Yeah. Interesting. Cool. I was trying to think what else. Oh, so let's talk about some of the other services that you're implementing with this. I know you're pulling in Sentry.
Sentry, yep.
Cool. So I set up Sentry for the first time on a project, and it was
Mhm.
like, oh, this is amazing that you get this insight. So when you say it handles all of your errors and exceptions, what does that mean? Well, if you publish your site and somebody goes to it and they hit an error, you can see exactly what that error is. It's like almost like local development. You want to be able to see the message, see what they were doing. And I found for me, especially with client projects, I'm not having to ask all these follow-up questions. I have all the information that I need right there,
Right.
which is amazing. The problem that I ran into, and it could just be my ignorance because I haven't used Sentry a ton, is that for local development, I was like triggering all these Sentry notifications. And I was like, oh, you probably don't want to turn this on until you're ready to publish your site.
There's config for that.
Oh,
I
there
think
is.
there's a
Okay.
single flag where it's like, turn it on or off for development.
Okay.
Or you can just filter it in your issues tab, which
Okay.
I'm personally just letting the errors fly
Okay.
and filtering it in the errors tab.
Got it. Got
Um,
it.
I also like how it's everywhere. It's in your remix loaders, it's in your actions, and it's on your client side. So it's everywhere where you could actually have problems.
Yeah. The other thing that service that I've been looking at is Post Hoc. Have you used that at all?
No, I need an analytics solution too.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. So for a hot second, I was like, isn't this what Century is doing? But it does a lot. It's like different. There is some
Mm.
overlap, but it handles a different subset of problems. And a lot of it is like checking to see how users are interacting with your application. It provides a lot of those analytics. I feel like it does a lot more. Like it's crazy how much stuff it does. And what all you can set up to. You can set up your feature flags with Post Hoc to be able to turn those on or run tests, do analytics with that. So pretty cool.
So many of those services are starting to overlap. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
Like
Yep.
errors and analytics and feature flags all coming together
Yeah.
because guess what?
Yes.
You want to flip a flag and see what's affected, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. Um, let's see. Another service I've been like using is Ingest. That one is amazing.
Really,
Have
I've
you?
never tried it.
Oh my goodness. It's so simple. So the only issue that I ran into at first, I was like, what is wrong? And AI caught this for me was I have ingest running on a next project. I'd set up middleware to handle auth with Supabase. And the matcher that I'd set up was preventing ingest from getting everything it needed. So as soon as I updated the matcher within the middleware, it had no problem. But basically, you just install ingest and it has a local server that will run and it will automatically recognize your project. And then you can set up background jobs. That's what ingest does. You can set up background jobs to handle a lot of functions, or you can also set up cron jobs. So with different apps that I've built, this has been really helpful if you have to send out, say, a lot of email. If you're using a serverless uh, framework or something that's going to take a little bit more time on the server, you can offload that to ingest. Or if you have something that you need to be recurring, ingest can handle all that. And the nice thing about it is kind of similar to Sentry. You see everything. You can see the logs, you can console.log things out, you can see what ran. And the nice thing about it too is if your job fails, it will try and rerun the job. Another place where I'm using it in addition to email is like with AI. So I send a request off to AI. Sometimes that can take a hot second to come back. And so what ingest does is it will handle all that for me. So pretty cool.
Okay, one thing I want to talk through that I really have almost no experience with
Mhm.
is doing email.
Oh, yeah.
How how do you do it? Moreover,
Yeah.
how do you do it without a service? Because sure, if you're going to use something
Oh,
like resend, what is it? Like an API call with like a
mhm.
to, a from, and like a body,
That's
right?
right.
So
That's
you'd
right.
you'd render your uh MJML or whatever that was,
Right.
the React to email thing and just pass it
Right.
in. But like
Right.
if I wanted to send an email on a node server,
Mhm.
how do you do it? Isn't there like an SMTP package or something that
There
just like
Yeah, there's
actually
Node
does that?
to email. There's Node to email or something like that. That's a package that can do all that. You do have to have a serverful environment to be able to
Yes.
send email. I just have tended to lean more into like a service that already exists. Resend is absolutely fantastic. We've had Zeno on the show before. The nice thing about using that, and some of it might be just my inexperience with Node email, is that it will also tell you, did this person receive the email? It'll run stats. Did it get sent successfully? And so this has been really helpful too in the past where I'm trying to troubleshoot for a client. It's like, well, did they even get the email? Okay, there it is. Like it went to their spam and I can report that back to them. There's another one called Mailtrap that is really good. I use that one with Laravel. You can
That's for
also use
testing,
it
right?
but you can also send regular emails with it. It also has a production version. But yeah, it's really great for testing. So what that does is you send the email and it catches
Yeah.
the email that you sent. Resend has a similar feature, and you can preview what that looks like within Resend or within Mailtrap. So you don't have to worry about, oh, did I just blast my entire user base with email that says test in it? Obviously, you don't want that. So that is really helpful for catching those instances.
That's awesome. Yeah, I'll have to look into that.
It's super
Um,
simple. I mean, I get with the service, you are gonna end up paying money,
Yeah.
What is interesting, if you use Supabase, say like Supabase is Auth, there are limitations on how many emails they can send out if you forgot a password
Yeah.
or I've even seen people complaining where it was like, hey, we had a product launch and all of a sudden we have all these users sign up. There may be additional limits there, but when it comes to email, what I did was it will also take SMTP information so you can connect that to Recent instead of using Supabase's email server, you can send that off to Resend
Oh,
to handle
yeah.
that
I
for you.
got you. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah,
Yep.
and I always wonder, like, if we were to use, like, Node Mailer or whatever the Node
Uh-huh.
email thing is, what is deliverability like? Is there ever a question
Yeah.
of, like, Gmail doesn't like this, Apple Mail
Yes.
is, like, flags it or whatever?
Yes. So there's issues there, which is also why I'm like, I'll just defer to a server that handles this full time. Like that's their job.
Yeah.
Gmail has certain rules with DMARC, if you've seen that, where what it wants you to do is add a DMARC value to your DNS. So it validates your URL and that way it knows this email is coming from this person instead of trying to say do phishing and change the reply to just because you can. But it allows for a little bit more control and that helps with deliverability. And really within the last couple years, Gmail or Google has made even a bigger deal about that. So that's another reason why like I defer to ConvertKit for a lot of that stuff in my own personal email. It's like I would rather just delegate that versus writing my own.
Yeah. I will probably try to build my own first and see what happens. I mean, because I think I've gotten it to work with Node Mailer in
Yeah.
the past, and I just wanna see, like, is that gonna cause problems? What's gonna
Yeah.
happen is if you need to send batch emails, oh, now you have an
Yep.
infrastructure problem. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
you
Well, and
can't
that's
just
where something like ingest comes in handy,
yeah,
even when you're
yes,
using something like Resend, where you can have it do all that for you.
yeah,
And I mean, with recent or sorry, with ingest, you can have it even fan out tasks. So what that means is you have like a master component that's like, hey, I'm going to send out baby jobs to all these other things and have
right.
it report back. So that's been really helpful. The other service that I wanted to shout out is Postmark. That's another great email solution. And I remember this was like several years ago. There was a service, I want to say it was Postmark went down. And it was amazing how many services use sorry, Postmark if it wasn't you, but let's say Postmark. Use Postmark because then all of a sudden their emails weren't working. So I remember I got a bunch of emails that day because Podia was using Postmark under the hood and people were saying, "Hey, I've tried to reset my password. I can't log in. What's happening?" And it's like, "Oh, well, Postmark is down." But I remember Wes Boss talking about the service being down and because of the way that he had written his code and basically created these drivers, he was just able to flip the
Well, okay,
credentials and still send out email, even if it is just temporarily until Postmark was able to come back up.
nice.
So super helpful. And I mean, that goes to kind of what you were saying about Prismas. I've seen similar things that people have talked about where it's like, oh, my DigitalOcean instance went down. DigitalOcean's having trouble. So I just changed the credentials and put up a temporary database on Linode and everything worked. It's just swapping out credentials and Prisma runs all of the same code everywhere.
Yeah,
So, just different things like that that are really helpful. Um, if you are setting up email, one thing I will say is that a lot of these services you have to go in and authenticate with them because if they're sending out email from their services, they don't want deliverability to be an issue. So if you start sending out a ton of spam, Google will flag their server and that will
yeah,
just affect everybody that they're sending out email from. So a lot of them, like Postmark, for example, if you want to send out email with them, you have to fill out a form and say, this is what I'm sending out. Here's a little bit of information. This is what I'm trying to do. And so I think that's one of the reasons why Zeno has seen so much success is because I don't know how he has it set up, but whether it's just like a testing environment versus a production environment, but you can get going a whole lot faster versus like waiting 24 hours to hear
mm,
back from Postmark or Mailtrap. And 24 hours is probably an exaggeration. It did take a couple of hours, but there is a waiting period involved.
gotcha. That's crazy.
Cool.
Well, okay, what about logging? I feel like it's
Mhm.
built into a lot of hosts nowadays. Like
Yep.
Vercel has logging if you've got that stuff there, or even front end logs. We don't have front end logs.
Yeah. I Most of the logging I was doing was just, like, trying to get stuff to pick up with Sentry so that if there was an error, I'd have all the information that I need, that it's tracking some of the other variables that are in play, but I don't have, like, a great system just for logging. I know that's something that Redwood kind of prided itself on, that it had a lot of that stuff built in. Is that where, something like Datadog would come into play?
I've never used Datadog. Most companies I've been at use Splunk. So you send all your
Okay.
logs to whatever, some service that loads it all into Splunk, and then you can
Yeah.
search those events.
Interesting. Yeah.
And it's really important for like analytics,
Mhm.
experiments, like you're defining like criteria based on, these events over time or these events for this segment of people or
Sure.
whatnot.
Sure. Now, I think, this does bring up a good question, is for somebody just trying to hack on a project, how
That's
important
me.
is all these things, you know?
Well, email is a necessity, right?
Yeah,
If you're building any kind of little SaaS, you have to be able to email your customers or your users, even if it doesn't have to be paid. But yeah, logging, I don't think you need it.
yeah,
Error reporting, I think, is pretty important. You should know if something's going wrong.
yeah,
Um, but yeah, most of this stuff is pretty important, but it also depends on your usage volume. Like you're not going
mhm.
to need ingest if you don't have the volume of users.
Right, right. What about storage? I'm trying to think of some of these other systems. Have you thought about that?
No, I'm at this point, like, I'm not gonna assume the use case for the application
Mhm.
in my starter template,
Okay.
right? So,
Yep.
like, blob storage, S3, whatever, isn't necessarily a feature that's gonna be needed unless,
Mhm.
like, I build in a whole, like, profile system for users and say, like, "This is table stakes," but
Yeah.
I don't think it is necessarily.
Yeah. So I did the For Devs One Project show with Jason Lingstorff.
Mhm,
Tigris supported or sponsored that particular project, so they really do have a great setup. But I think it's just, hopefully I'm not misspeaking, I think it's just a wrapper for AWS.
mhm,
On my project, because I decided I'm gonna go with Supabase, you get database, auth, and storage all included.
yep,
So that is nice having that kinda built in, but I'm working on creating components to get those drag and drop upload features, so I don't have
yeah,
to rewrite that every single time.
yeah, yeah,
Cool, let me see.
yeah. I
Oh, go ahead.
I think because you were just saying like, oh, make your like if you're just hacking on an app or whatever. I have this dream that I want to build some little apps. I want to get a Raspberry Pi. I want to hook
Mm,
it up, expose it to the internet, and I want to self-host from my desk projects that people can use. I think that would be so cool.
yeah,
And sure, it's only one. It's not distributed around the world and blah blah
sure.
blah. I could also host on Cloudflare, sure, but like there's something so cool to be like, "This thing is hosting what I'm running."
Yeah, that's funny. So my dad was he's always been in tech, so we've been early adopters. Like, we had a Apple II computer in our house, like well, we even had a DOS computer. Funny
Sweet.
story there was he bought the first computer, so I was probably, like, 3 or 4 years old, and it was a lot of money at the time, and my mom was like, "Okay, but this is the last one."
Oh god.
Yeah, so but anyways, my dad just always had computers sitting around the house, and he still has a computer that he uses for local development at the house, and he's like, "Oh, yeah,
Nice.
I'm just running off the server over here," and
Yeah,
he's converted an old computer into a server. So,
that's
yeah.
awesome.
Yeah, stuff
Yeah,
like that.
I wanna try, like, with what I'm building to either, yeah, be able to self-host or just do something like get a DigitalOcean box and run, like,
Mhm.
5 apps off of it, you
Yeah,
know? It's that long running node server. If I wanna send email from there, I can.
yeah,
Heck, you can send email from a serverless environment like
yeah,
Vercel too, like, it doesn't
yeah.
matter.
It's just when you start doing that in bulk that you've
In
gotta start.
bulk, yeah.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
start timing out.
Yeah. Well, and for that matter, Vercel, excuse me, Vercel does have stuff for cron jobs built in. You don't even have to reach for something like ingest if you want to do that, if you don't have a lot of processes or things like that. So, and I
Yeah.
think that goes back to the question of scalability, solving for problems that don't even exist yet. And what's the purpose of this project?
It's crazy because I'm doing like very local first approach for this, or
Mhm.
in a sense of like, I only care about my local development setup right now. It's SQLite, it's this and that. And then I started writing end-to-end tests, and all of my pipelines broke because
Mhm.
I wasn't, seeding the database and having SQLite where I need it in between every test and all this. And then you start thinking, oh yeah, I gotta think about like deployment, where these things are gonna go. And I'm not there yet. Like, I think
Yeah.
my goal is just literally have it all running locally, and then where you host is such another decision.
Mhm.
Does it go on a long running server? Does the app get distributed? Do you do serverless on something like Vercel? Everything has a limitation, and it comes with its own set of challenges.
Yeah.
But while in some cases, I think where you host and how you set up infrastructure is specific to the needs of the application,
Mhm.
I think for this, I want to have like a default way of like this starter can be deployed immediately, right out of the
Mhm.
gate. So like
Yep.
maybe make an opinion, put it right up to DigitalOcean, or like
Mhm.
as like a long running node server, I feel like it's like the easiest baseline place to go, or Vercel, whatever, like
Yeah.
something that can be hooked up to Git, right?
Yep. Yep.
And then you at least have like a frictionless path of getting it out to the world.
Yeah.
Um, and then you have to think, okay, if this application has to do certain things, it could be hosted in different ways.
Yeah. Let me ask you one more package, and I know we're getting close on time. Have you experimented with Tailwind 4 yet?
Yes, I'm upgraded to Tailwind 4 on
You
all my
are.
projects. Yeah.
So I started implementing it on a project. I was skeptical, but it feels good. I th The
All I
original
did was the
comment.
upgrade. I
Oh,
didn't
you
touch
didn't?
anything different. So it feels the
Okay,
same to me.
got it. So Brad and I are part of a Discord server, and one of the comments that he made originally when Tailwind 4 was released was, "Oh, this feels nice. You are going to be using CSS. Why not save all of your custom variables within a CSS file instead of deferring to your tailwind.config.js
Yeah.
file?"
Yeah.
And to me, that's one of the biggest changes. There's a lot of stuff that
Yeah.
happened under the hood in terms of speed, but for user interface, that's one of the biggest things, that one of the biggest API changes. And I was working on a project, and I upgraded it to Tailwind V4, and I was really surprised. I've used the Tailwind UI, like one of their starter templates for my website. So if you go there, that is a Tailwind portfolio project. And sometimes trying to wade through all the CSS variables was
Yeah.
like really cumbersome, and trying to figure out what was controlling what. It was a little overwhelming, and so I was skeptical of this move to V4, but it felt great. I'm with you. Just being able to have all of your CSS variables right there within CSS, and it's like if you wanna write any custom CSS, your
It's
variables are
right
right
there.
there. You're not
Yeah.
trying to duplicate it and keep those in sync between your JavaScript file and your CSS file.
Yeah. For sure. And it makes me think about as CSS progresses faster,
Mhm.
how Tailwind keeps up, and the fact that they're just getting less I don't know how to call it. Like there's less Tailwind things about Tailwind. It's
Yeah.
starting to it's starting to get closer to CSS even more so. And that was my
Mhm.
favorite thing about Tailwind to begin with. It's like just CSS. And so
Right.
now that like your Tailwind entry point is a CSS file, you think, oh, well, if I need to like write a custom class, you don't have to do all this at apply crap.
Yep.
Just write a custom class and any of the Tailwind variables are available for you
Yep.
to like leverage.
Yep. Yeah, so what's interesting is with all the new variable stuff, it is using the at theme layer that they've
Yeah.
created, which again
Yeah.
is another awesome CSS feature. We had Alex on talking about all the new CSS stuff, and that was one of the pieces, is when you're working with these external libraries, being able to set the layers for when those things get applied or when they get imported.
Yeah, or even your custom stuff. At the end, you're just like,
Yep.
"This is mine. It goes on top. Done."
Yep. Yep. So cool. Awesome. Well, is there anything else before we go?
Man, that was everything. That was a
Sweet.
good whirlwind tour
I
of
know,
everything we've
right?
been up to.
Okay, so we will head into the next section of the show, which is our picks and plugs section, where we pick something that we like, typically something we bought on Amazon, a show we've watched on Netflix. It could be anything tech or non-tech related. And then we plug something. And usually this is something that we've worked on or social platform that we're on, whatever that might be. So, Brad, do you have any picks and plugs?
I do. I've been going hard into planning my wife and I's 10-year anniversary trip to New York
Yeah.
City. I have this giant Notion page. There's like 1,000 suggestions on it. I've been asking a bunch of people. So, like, if anybody out there listening has suggestions for us about what to do in New York City, send it my way. But there's a creator named Casey Neistat, and he has a friend named New York Nico, and he has this book that just
Ah,
came out, Guide to NYC. So
very
we got it.
cool.
I'm working our way through it. It's pretty cool. It's 100 places that are very like kind of off the beaten pathy, but very like New York
Yes.
City-ish. And that's what
Okay.
we wanted, like something
Yeah.
that was like, we're gonna hit all the
We'll
tourist
check that out.
spots. Here's the other stuff.
Okay.
So yeah, planning's going good. We're excited for it. And
And then
then
like,
I want to plug my YouTube channel. I've been streaming all this work that I've been doing on my starter app. I do it in the mornings, like for like an hour before work, and then I do it at night for like the last hour before I go to bed. So I've been streaming a lot lately and getting a ton done and been feeling really good about like um, my productivity so far in 2025.
that's awesome.
All right, what you got?
Okay, so I will g I've been inspired by your pick, and we'll pick something similar. So, I'm going to pick the Atlas Obscura, and this is a book, but they also have a website, so I'll include a link to Amazon in the chat. But it's similar to what you're talking about, except it's not one city specific. So, they have cities all over the world where it's things that are off the beaten path, and you can go and see what may or may not be touristy. So usually when we go to a city, we'll check to see what it recommends. We don't always do those things, but it is good to have those as options. And this is also made for a great gift. We've given this away to at Christmas to, I don't know, tons of people, just because it's fun to see different things that it picks up on. So, or
So
recommends.
is this like a book per city?
No, it's one book that has everything for the world, and I just realized the link that I
Crazy.
shared, it says that it was published in 2016, which that's the version we have. It's still somewhat current, but they have a more recent here, I'll share that one. They have more recent editions. Their website is definitely more recent, more current than even the print. But you can check that out as well. But, like, we went to Philadelphia couple years ago, and one of the things that it recommended was this like mosaic garden, and Henry took our niece there, and it was pretty cool, just all the artwork that this person had created. It's like everything is a mosaic everywhere you look. So that was a recommendation from this resource.
This is awesome. There's 772 things for New York City. You just gave me homework to look at this now.
Yeah. Yeah, awesome. Awesome. And like I said, it makes a great gift. So even if you're like, I'm not traveling, we've enjoyed giving it to people.
Sweet.
Then for my plug, oh goodness, this is a fun one. I'll plug my YouTube channel. So I have not talked about this. Brad, I don't even think you know this yet. So there is I guess it's an agency. They're based out of Australia called Electrify. I think
Okay.
that's me fine. Oh, they're called Changer Studio, but the program that I'm in is like this Electrify. I'll include a link to them. So if you go to changerstudio.com, and one of the things that they do is they help different creators, particularly with YouTube. They do different workshops and things like that. So I got invited as part of the education branch of YouTube to be a part of this program. And they do 8 weeks of these master classes, and then as part of those 8 weeks, there's another 20 weeks. So I have a meeting on Tuesday where I go to this masterclass for 2 hours, and then I have another meeting on Thursday where it's just like a check-in for an hour, and the check-ins go 20 weeks. But it's amazing. So most of the workshops that they do are paid workshops, but as part of their education stuff, that's all part of their philanthropic nonprofit work. And so, which is amazing that they offer all of that for free. But when we went to the first night, I had to fill out an application and get accepted into their cohort. And it was funny the first night, everybody's like, "Is this a scam? What's going on? Like, why are you like offering all this for free?" But it's because it's part of their nonprofit philanthropic arm. They had like people from YouTube in the first meeting explaining like this is how the algorithm works, and they have different master classes each Tuesday based on different types of content. So I've been learning a ton about YouTube and how it works and audience building and things like that. So I'm super excited to start like get back into making videos on YouTube and like really working on my channel. So I am probably one of the smallest channels in my cohort. I think I'm the second to smallest. A lot of the other people that are there have 100 and 200,000 subs, but they will help grow creators to millions. And so it's really cool, just all the expertise that they have and things like that. So go check out my YouTube channel. It's Self Teach Me, and I'll be applying a lot of the things that I'm learning to my channel, talking about programming and some of the stuff I'm doing with Build 12. So I'm really excited about some of the things I've been planning.
That's awesome.
Yeah. Yeah. So it is funny. We meet at 7 o'clock my time because it is like 7 o'clock in the morning their time in Australia. And last night we kind of went down a rabbit hole talking about the different American Australian spellings, which is why I said that at the top of the show.
Their website is amazing, by the way.
I know, right? Well, and that's kind of what got me to apply was somebody had reached out to me and said, "Hey, we think you'd be a good fit for this program." And I thought, "Well, is this a scam?" And I went to their website and I was like, "If it's a scam, it's a really
It's a
beautiful
good
scam."
one.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, thanks everybody for hanging out in the chat. It's a fun show just to talk about some of the things that we're building and projects and stacks. And I mean, this is, we can talk about this all day.
Yep.
Awesome. Well, if you are listening in your podcatcher of choice, please leave a rating and review. That just helps other listeners find the podcast, helps us bring on great guests and get sponsors and all the things. But until then, that's all we got. All right. And next week, if you are hanging in, I will tell you we have a guest. We have some good guests coming up. I'm super excited. I think we have Chris Sev coming on next week.
Nice.
Let's see. I'm just gonna check. Sorry, bear with me. Upcoming recordings. Next week we have Ryan Chinky. I'm pretty sure that we have Chris Sev too. I just don't think his thing's in there. So I think next week we're doing 2 recordings on Tuesday and Wednesday. And is that right? Yes. So Tuesday we will be on the same time with Chris Sev. Wednesday we will be on the same time with Ryan Chinky. So Chris just joined the Laravel team as their head of DevRel. So that should be really good. We've had Chris on before talking about AI because he also has his own startup called Video Tap. It's a great episode if you're interested just in prompt engineering and things like that. That episode opened my eyes to a lot of things. And then Ryan Chinky. So today we are even talking about Prisma. And Ryan Chinky is DevRel at Prisma. And so Ryan's fun in general. I met him at the Redwood JS Conf. But yeah, he can talk about some of those features that we've been talking about with Prisma, which should be pretty cool.
I want to talk to him about hosted Postgres on Prisma that just came out. I'm strongly considering that.
Very cool. All right. Well, thanks, chat, and we will see you on Tuesday.
See y'all.